It took me 26 years of playing guitar to figure out what I'm about to show you in the next 21 minutes. In this lesson, I'll show you what I would do differently if I could start from scratch so that you can avoid the mistakes that I made and start sounding like a real guitarist much faster. I've taught over 25,000 guitar lessons to players all around the world, and these are the same essentials that help my students go from stuck to creating beautiful melodies, expressive solos, and real, on-the-spot improvisation. As always, you can download the lesson summary PDF with charts and backing tracks at the link in the description below. The most important skills for learning how to solo, improvise, and write riffs in modern music are by far the major and minor pentatonic scales. The problem is, the way that most people learn the pentatonic scale gets them stuck and struggling to connect notes across the guitar neck, the classic boxes. So let me show you my favorite way to see the fretboard. I wish someone had taught me this from day one. So I started with those classic boxes, but the diagonal pentatonic simplified and exploded my musicality. So for a diagonal minor pentatonic, you just need the 2-3 pattern to play anywhere on the fretboard. This works perfectly for jamming on any minor tracks. It's literally just a 2-note set and a 3-note set. And you can stack those across the entire fretboard, no matter where you start. You just have to watch out for the B string. Now for the major pentatonic, the 3-2 patterns work in the exact same way. And this works perfectly for jamming on any kind of major tracks that you might find. So in the key of A, three, 2 from anywhere, even the open strings. Most guitarists say, when I solo and improvise, it just sounds scaly, like this. And that was me too. I practiced scales up and down, in thirds and fourths, all the classic patterns to a metronome, perfectly, clean, all verbatim, just like this. 3-note groups. And that was what I was told to do. But when it came to improvising or getting creative, nothing. The material just didn't come out. Hours a day, it did not matter how much I practiced. But here's the fix. Stop practicing them verbatim, straight up and down like that. Instead, start practicing them musically by targeting them specifically inside of an improvisation. This is called limitation or constraints practice. And so I'll take that verbatim little 3-note group exercise that I played a second ago, and let me show you how I might use it in an improvisation. So instead of just playing it straight up and down, I'm gonna choose an area and try and use it as a tool in my improv. And don't forget to work on your weak techniques also. If you're weak at hammer-ons, pull-offs, slides, little hammer, little pull-off, slides, little bends, and of course vibrato. So you want to make sure that you're targeting whichever ones are giving you trouble, but in a specific way and inside an improvisation. That's that limitation or targeting practice. At first, it might sound a little redundant or a little boring as you practice, but you could do this for 1 to 2 minutes per practice session, and you'll start to see some real progress in being able to tap into those new sounds that you're practicing. And now for a quick word from the sponsor of today's video. My full course, The Diagonal Pentatonic Method. If you're ready to stop struggling with boring scale shapes and instead learn a system that allows you to fluidly copy and paste great sounding licks and lines across the entire guitar neck, grab my full Diagonal Pentatonic Method. You'll get over 108 interactive exercises and lessons that take your scales and turn them into real music today. Grab 20% off today by clicking the link in the description or using coupon code STARTOVER20. Now back to the lesson. So if you want to play amazing improvisations or great melodies, you can't just rely on scale shapes alone to get you there, because not knowing the notes on the neck is like not knowing the streets in your city. If you happen to take a wrong turn at some point on your drive and you're unaware of what streets connect where, you'll be taking wrong turns left and right to try and get back on track. Unfortunately, those wrong turns on the guitar sound bad, and we don't want the listeners to have to suffer through a bunch of clams because you don't know where you are on the neck. For example, However, the number one problem with learning the notes is that most books and teachers show these complicated and overwhelming diagrams with 12 different notes on each string, including all the sharps and flats. That's like trying to memorize an entire city map. Instead of teaching this nonsense to people, I found a simpler and faster way to learn this if you're experienced or just starting out to learn them. Let me show you what that is. Natural notes only, no sharps, no flats, just the 7 letters of our musical alphabet. Here's how to do it. Take one string at a time. And what you want to do is either say or sing the natural notes as you play them on the guitar. So for example, the low E string, E, F, G. I even recommend singing more. E, F, G, even if you're not a great singer. A, B, C, D, E. You could also use a C drone backing track underneath so you start to hear the major scale and how this should sound. And you can go ahead and download the one here from the link in the description. This is awesome. And if you practice this in small chunks of time, not hours of grinding, neuroscience shows that short spaced sessions stick way better than long marathons. 5 minutes or less per practice session is great. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. What goes up must come down. A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Now, once you've got it down, you want to mix up the patterns. You might play every other note like this. A, C, B, D, C, E, D, F, E, G, F, A. You might play some different note groups like we played earlier. A, B, C, B, C, D, C, D, E. Then, once natural notes are feeling great, it's easy to sharp and flat notes for the other different keys. But what's really incredibly important is that you always stay on the edge of your ability. If it feels easy, make it harder. So contrary to popular belief, we always want to be pushing beyond our limits. Comfort and perfection are not really the goal here. Along with our fretboard knowledge, if you want to understand how music works, there is one scale that will clear everything up for you. It's the answer to knowing what notes fit together to build chords, all other scales, and even arpeggios. So imagine for a second that you've perfected your skills at cooking steak, but you show up to a family gathering and everyone is a vegetarian. It would be pretty hard to convince everyone to just eat the steak because it's all you know how to make. And that's really how only being able to play the pentatonics on the neck is like that. It's a big part of sounding great on guitar. It's an essential skill, but it doesn't make you flexible, diverse, or allow you to understand what you're actually doing in a holistic way. Learning the major scales and keys on the guitar will unlock your understanding and allow you to connect the dots between the fretboard and the music. It's like learning the fundamental skills of cooking so that you could cook anything. Sauteed tofu, anyone? The fact is, as you grow as a musician, you'll show up to jam sessions or gigs, and you're going to get thrown different keys and scales that you need to be able to jam in. The diversity of skill sets with the different scales and keys is fundamental, just like different food preparations are in the kitchen. So if you want to actually learn how to play and understand, what you're playing, you absolutely want to learn all 15 major scales that might pop up in music. And the easiest way to do that, however, isn't by starting to play them on the guitar at first. Here's what I teach instead. And you'll start to put them in practice and learn them much faster if you do this way. So master the full 7-note major scale away from the guitar, one key at a time, just a couple minutes a day. Write out what I call the 15 logical major scales every day. That's all the way from 0 to 7 sharps and 7 flats. Why? Because once you know the major scale theory, you actually know all 7 modes in every key, every pentatonic scale, major or minor, and all your triads, 7th chords, and most of the chords and arpeggios that you'll ever use in popular music. Taking these scales and writing them out on the included fretboard diagram in the downloadable PDF will get you to see the fretboard in a much deeper way. The major scale theory is the blueprint of music. Understand it, and suddenly chords, progressions, and solos all make a lot more sense. Once you've written them out on those blank necks, then play them on the guitar to solidify your understanding and watch the magic happen. Now let's talk about the most important ingredient in music, rhythm. You can take a deep breath. Don't worry. Forget the metronome for now. The metronome is only useful as an advanced tool, but for most players, it's boring and it's not very musical. It doesn't give you the most important information about the groove, how real drummers make beats, rhythms, and subdivisions feel a certain way, meaning it only provides a pulse, a really basic pulse, which is the most basic part of the groove. It's great, right? But it doesn't teach you how to hear and feel eighth notes, triplets, and sixteenths. This is essential for getting in the pocket and sounding like a much deeper musician. Instead of boring metronome work, use real grooves. You can download drum loops from players like Jake Reed or AJ Hall, or backing tracks that give you feel and subdivisions. But rather than just playing aimlessly over tracks, learn to count like this. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. So you want to know how to count whole notes, right? 4 beats each. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3. Or half notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Quarter notes. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth notes. 2 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and triplets. 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 3 triplet, 4 triplet, or sixteenths. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a... These are the essentials. If you can't feel these, you can't lock into the groove. And when I say that you need to count them, don't count like a robot. I learned from the great Adam Neely about how important counting is. When you count out loud, make sure it sounds like the music that you're counting, with flow, with connection, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. You don't want to count like that. And one other key ingredient to sounding great rhythmically, rhythm doesn't just happen with the beginning of the note, The length and end of each note is just as important in order to sound connected and in the groove. I've taught hundreds of guitarists who just end up making the end of their notes short, like we want legato, which means to smoothly connect each one to one another. Over the track, not like this. Instead, like this. This instantly takes your playing from amateur to sounding much more like a great guitarist. But if you want to ascend to a greater level of playing on the guitar, you really only need two of your senses: touch and your ears. However, the interesting thing is many of us start out with tablature, notation, some kind of fretboard diagrams to learn tunes and skills. Learning with our eyes, right? But this can be a distraction. Many of the greatest musicians in the world can't read a lick of music, and that's okay because they clearly are using their ears on a much higher level. As a guitar player, you've got to start training and using your ears as soon as possible. That means getting your eyes off the tablature and off the sheet music. Instead, spend time figuring out things by ear. And you don't need fancy ear training apps. What you need is a catalog of music that you love and your guitar in your hands. If hearing like the bigger picture feels tough at first, start simple. Listen for the bass notes of the chords. Figure out how they're moving and what the rhythm. Okay, it's going A, G, F, and each of those are for 4 beats. 2, 3, 4. So most of the time, these tunes are gonna kind of line up with really classic patterns of music theory. Stuff that you might already know from the, major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, back to 1. Now, listening to this is in minor, right? So I'm starting on a minor chord. We'll build it up piece by piece. A minor, it's probably the 6th chord, going down to G, which is the 5 chord. F, so it's like 6, 5, 4, 3 in the key of C, or A minor. And if there were licks, you could kind of isolate them. Maybe even if you're having trouble figuring it out, record it on your phone, loop it, zoom in on every little nuance, like the slides or the bends that people are doing. And don't worry too much about exact positions at first. Many of the greats actually just lived in box 1 anyway, but more importantly, just focus on finding the notes, knowing their names, and recognizing the key that you're playing in. When you do this, you'll start to hear music differently. Suddenly you'll recognize chord changes, bass lines, and progressions everywhere. You relate this to your major scale understanding, and you'll be in the grocery store and realize, oh, that's a 1, 4, 5 progression, or that's a 1, 5, 6 minor 4 progression. And the best part, even if you don't know, what the key is right away, you can grab your guitar, find the root note, and start playing. Ear training is absolutely essential. But have you ever noticed when you practice that it sounds kind of boring? So you play those chords you've been working on. You play the scale that you've been practicing repeatedly. The riffs. But something is missing. As a bedroom guitarist, many of us fall in the trap of practicing in isolation, meaning we think we need to be perfect on everything before we apply it to real music. This is a huge mistake. You are going to make the fastest progress by putting these things into practice with real music. Making mistakes, figuring out if you can play it at the real tempo or need to slow it down. And whether that's you playing along with the original chording, a backing track, or my absolute favorite way to practice, and this beats the metronome every single time, Ableton Live. So since 2015, I've used Ableton Live every single day. It lets me build custom backing tracks like this, and they can be as simple or as complex as I want to be. You know, I can change the key, I can change the tempo. I could drop in some of those drum grooves that I was talking about earlier from my favorite guys. I can record myself for feedback, and that is huge because when you hear yourself back, you immediately know, is my tone working? Is my timing solid? Am I in tune? How are those bends sounding? Is my vibrato wacky? You know, although it's uncomfortable at first, that's real world practice, and it has made me infinitely better, much faster. Now that you've learned what you need to take your playing from good to great, make sure to watch this video next to learn 5 exercises that will take your playing from scaly to confident anywhere on the guitar neck.